Good morning, friends. Let's go back to Luke 19 and read what happened when Jesus gave instructions to his disciples to fetch him that donkey. In verse 29, we read, "When he drew near to Bethphage and Bethany, at the mount that is called Olivet, he sent two of the disciples, saying, 'Go into the village in front of you, where on entering you will find a colt tied, on which no one has ever yet sat. Untie it and bring it here. If anyone asks you, why are you untying it, you shall say this, the Lord has need of it.' So those who were sent went away and found it just as he had told them. And as they were untying the colt, its owner said to them, 'Why are you untying the colt?' And they said, 'The Lord has need of it.' And they brought it to Jesus, and throwing their cloaks on the colt, they set Jesus on it." Now, we talked in the message yesterday about how Jesus is the Messiah and about how he was finally making that declaration public by riding the donkey into Jerusalem. But believe it or not, there are count them, four other details from this passage that further demonstrates that Jesus is the sovereign Lord, the Messiah. First off, we are so used to Jesus doing things like this that we might forget that he is demonstrating the power of his omniscient deity, because he is telling his disciples precisely where they will find the donkey, the circumstances in which they will find it, and he equips them with what to say, knowing full well they'll have to say it. All of this before the fact. He is sovereign even over our futures, and best we don't forget that, especially at times like we're living in right now. Secondly, the donkey in question is going to be a donkey upon which no one has ever sat or ridden before. And that further shows that Jesus wasn't just playing the odds that they'd find a donkey tied up someplace shortly after entering the village. This would be a rare kind of donkey to stumble across, indeed. But more important than that, the fact that the donkey had never been ridden before demonstrated that had been appointed for a sacred use. And yes, it'd be easy to pass this off as unimportant because it's not something we think about much in our modern culture. But it is a sign of royalty that the royal one is the only one to have sat on the throne or sat on the horse or in this case sat on the donkey. Because the Lord Most High does not share a seat with anyone, at least not when he's proclaiming the fullness of who he is. And there is none like him. And this idea might fall on a lot of deaf ears in our modern culture once again, but that's simply because a lot of people today have abandoned the very concept of something being sacred, of something being set aside, of something being pure and unsullied. And as silly as it may sound from that perspective, but there was something monumentally important about the fact that that donkey had never been ridden before. Because that donkey, as lowly and humble as it might have been, was intended to serve as the means to introduce the Messiah to the world. And speaking of that donkey, when Jesus instructed his disciples what to say when questioned, he told them to say, "The Lord has need of it." And of course, that points to Jesus as Lord and his sovereign ability to, in essence, commandeer any resource he needs, and rightfully so. But there's something actually more here, I think, maybe. Because Greek, in my limited experience in learning it, is a far more precise language than English. But there are still some ambiguities in it. And in this case, this statement could equally be translated, "Its Lord has need of it." As in, why are you taking the donkey? Because its Lord has need of it. And that would point even more to the fact that Jesus is the Lord of all. As the Apostle John puts it, all things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. You see, Jesus is not just the Lord of the people, of us people. He's the Lord of the earth. He is Lord of the fishes. He is Lord of the birds. He is Lord of the beasts. He is sovereign over all things. And then fourth, we read that returning to Jesus with a donkey, they set Jesus on it. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean or point to the physical way in which Jesus mounted the donkey. My guess is that he swung his own leg over the donkey and sat down on it under his own power, rather than anyone picking him up and setting him down on it. That would be a very awkward scene. But the point of saying they set Jesus on it is the idea that by common consent, they prepared the donkey for him by laying their cloaks across its back to make it as comfortable as possible. And Jesus sat upon it like a king sits upon his throne for the first time. It was, in essence, a form of a coronation, a public act that indicated that the people watching Jesus were seeing him as their king. And yes, a great many of those people didn't really understand what that meant. Even after Jesus' death and even his resurrection, the apostles themselves were struggling to figure it out. But this is nevertheless significant. Like if people might set their king on the throne, not because they physically help him sit down on the throne, but because they approve and accept and rejoice at his sitting, so too the Lord's disciples set him upon that donkey. Now, I may have given the perspective yesterday in the message that the triumphal entry was only ironic, and it was at its core only a sad event. And while the Lord did weep, and that weeping, that sorrow was a very significant part of the event, and in irony in that way, but it nevertheless was a triumphal entry. And Jesus did tell the Pharisees that if the people stopped celebrating, the very stones would fill the silence. And we'll talk more about that tomorrow. But despite the frailties of human perception and understanding, Jesus was and is the Messiah, the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And it was right and proper for him to receive praise on that occasion, as it is always. So, in light of all those details that just show so very clearly that he is the sovereign Lord, that he is even today our Messiah, let us also celebrate by praising him. With that in mind, I pray you have a good and godly day, and I can't wait to see you next time.